Hi again, Mark Mosiman back in our office to actually look at the files that we've recorded in Duisburg at Shimadzu. They have not been merged yet, however, all the triggers are embedded in both files, so the synchronization and the merging of these files can be done now, today, as I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So first of all, what I want to show you is the files that we've actually recorded. Now remember, the light NIRS, the lab NIRS, the FOIR 3000 and any other NIRS systems in the past from Shimadzu record the files always as OMM files. Now OMM files are files that we cannot read with any software except for, of course, the Shimadzu software. And there is software over in Korea which is called NIRS SPM, which was previously used to actually look at the file and do some analysis. However, with the new software that has been created in Amsterdam by Biosemi, very exciting. We have tools. So first of all, we can actually convert the OMM file, respectively the text file, to a PDF file. And as soon as we have the PDF file available at hand, we can use BESA, we can use EEG Lab, we can use any software that can actually read a PDF file and do simple analysis. This was previously not possible. However, now that the software is available, we can actually do this. The other thing I'd like to show you, of course, and that's the whole point of this video, is to actually take the NIRS file, take the EEG file, and according to our principle, which we call the zipper principle, we'll bring these two files together so we can actually then look at the EEG and the oximetry, the NIRS file, on a single screen using BESA, using even ActiRead, a simple PDF reader. So let's get started. Let me head to the actual directory where the two files reside. Remember, the files are still single files. We have collected a NIRS file, we have collected an EEG file. However, in the files embedded are these crucial trigger information, which I will explain which trigger actually represents what. So let's head to the directory of Joanna, which is right here. So here are the two files. We have a text file, which initially was an OMM file, but every NIRS system from Shimadzu allows you to export the OMM file as a text file. Currently in ActiView, we can only convert or read the text file, but that's okay because it's a simple process in the NIRS system to export it as a text file. However, in the future, there may be a release of Acti tools that actually also can read an OMM file. In fact, I've been speaking to Biosemi, and it's probably not that far off that we can also read other files, like from NIRS, like from Artinis, you name them. We should be able to read those and convert those into a PDF file that can be then merged, of course, with the Active2 file. So this is the file right here, the text file. When I double click on it, use editor, we can see all the channels that we've recorded, but apart from that, we can't do much. The PDF file, obviously, is the EEG file that we recorded from Joanna's head whilst we were doing the Jenga. So these are the two files that we've recorded. As you can see, they are not connected in any way. So one's a text file, 3 megabytes. The other one is an EEG file, 30 megabytes. Be reminded, we've cut out some channels on the EEG because the cap that we've used, as you would have seen on the video, is an old cap that we've borrowed from a hospital in Switzerland. The labels were coming off a little bit and some of the holders didn't work, so we couldn't put the electrodes in properly. So we decided to actually show 8 to 10 channels of EEG, which is fair enough. Okay, so this is where the files reside. So let's go and head to ActiTools. ActiTools is a brilliant tool, especially the new ActiTool that adds 2 new tabs. One's called the text to PDF file converter. The other one is the merger tool. So it's a text and BDF file merger. This is really cool because if you just recorded NIRS from the light NIRS, from the lab NIRS, from the old FOIR 3000, all you can do here with this particular tab is you can then convert the text file to a BDF file. So you end up with a BDF file that can be read in BESA, in NIRS SPM, in EEG Lab, any software that allows you to actually look at BDF files. Okay, this little tool is quite hefty because what we can do is we can upsample the very slow NIRS file. Remember, the NIRS file is sampled at around 13 Hertz. We have 75 or 80 milliseconds of a sample window. So the actual sample rate would be around 13 Hertz, which is very low. And that is the whole problem that we will also have, not only for synchrony of the triggers, but to actually display a very slow sampled file with a very fast sampled EEG file. The BDF file from the EEG, from Biosemi, sampled traditionally around 2 kHz. Obviously you can go to 16, but for this particular reason I'd say 2 kHz. So what we need to do is we need to upsample. If we wanted to merge, we need to upsample the NIRS file to the same sample rate as the EEG file. This is done in the merger itself. As soon as we merge the two files, Biosemi looks at the actual NIRS file, it looks at the sample rate of the EEG file, and it will bring the two files to the same sample rate. So that's all done automatically, including a filter applied so the NIRS file doesn't look like a staircase, but it looks really nice like the NIRS file would look. In the converter file, we can choose what the sample rate should be. So let's go ahead and choose 2 kHz. Okay, so I'll choose 2 kHz. I can't do anything here. Once these the process is completed, the green LED will come on. So let's hit the start. And I hit the OK button. Okay, so that's it. As you can see, we upsampled the file to 2 kHz. The original sample rate was 13.3 Hertz, which is extremely slow, but that's normal. Number of channels we've converted is 60. Why is it 60 channels, not 20? It's because we have oxy, we have deoxy, and we have total oxy, total hemoglobin, so that gives us 60 channels. Number of samples we did is 4,192. The total progress took 340 seconds. That's it. So we can close this window. Let's open Joanna and let's find the file. Here is the original NIRS file, the text file, and here is our converted BDF file. In fact, when we look at the actual size of the file, it's pretty obvious that we've done something to the file. We've upsampled the file to 2 kHz. So the original file size was 3 megabytes. Now it's 114 megabytes, so it's quite a lot larger. Let's go to ActiRead. Just do a quick and simple read of the file to see what it looks like. So we go to new file. The text file is not visible because ActiRead nor BESA can actually read a text file. So that's why we've converted to PDF. So here's the file. You can say open the file, and immediately we see 16 channels. Because ActiRead can't display more on a single screen, but we see the 60 channels right here, all the way to channel 1. So channel 1 here, channel 60 here. And of course, if I want to display more than just one channel, I go to 17, for example, but I still only see 16. That's the way ActiRead operates. So we have 16 channels of NIRS. We have channel oxy, deoxy, and total hemoglobin. So that's channel 1. Channel 2, oxy, deoxy, total. Channel 2. Let's change the gain. We can change it a little bit further to about 20 millivolts. And here we can see our oximetry that we've recorded from Joanna during the Jenga. So we can move forward we can see some things. Now mind you, the file may not be so beautifully nice as it would be recorded otherwise. And the reason for this is because NIRS data is not prone to any electrical artifacts. So electrical artifacts doesn't influence the actual NIRS data, but what does is a light source. And because we were filming, obviously we had a big light source like this one here that actually influences one side of the head of Joanna, and that's why we're not looking at the other channels. They're not so nice. These are pretty good actually for the NIRS that we've collected, so keep that in mind when you watch this video. Okay, so we can change here the time base. We can go to 30 seconds. We can jump to so we see 30 seconds now on the screen. I don't want to spend time looking at the NIRS, analyzing the NIRS. That's your thing. My thing is to explain you the triggers. Okay, when you look at the bottom, we can see these little trigger marks here. When I go to monopolar zoom, as I've shown you in various videos before, it's a really nice tab. You can actually zoom in on these triggers. So let's just zoom in on this event here and make sure that we actually see a couple of triggers. So when I look at the length of the event, I have two time cursors. One I'm going to position around here, and the other one I'm going to position around here. So the event of Joanna's response or oximetry raise in the head was around 1 second, as we can see down here. The triggers that are introduced, however, these are the time triggers. As I explained just previously in Duisburg, is when we actually start recording the file, the Active 2 via the USB receiver will send a 1 second marker. Every 1 second we embed a marker in the NIRS file. Here's the marker red at the bottom of the screen, and when we actually measure the difference between the first and the second time, it's around 1 second. Now, having said that, it shows in 977 milliseconds, which is virtually a second. However, if I was going to zoom in even more, I will notice that the trigger marks are not exactly where they're supposed to be, and so if we move those a little bit to the appropriate point in time, we will soon see it'll be around a second. Okay. Now, in a perfect world, it would be a second. In a not so perfect world, remember that even a sample rate of the NIRS is not exactly 13 Hertz. Could be 13 this time, could be 12 that time. It could shift and jitter a little bit. So give and take, what we want to achieve is we send 1 second, every 1 second we send a trigger to the actual NIRS file. So let's open BESA. And this again, I'm not going to analyze the file or do anything. I'm just going to look at the file, show you that the file can actually be opened using BESA. And BESA really beautifully also labels all the channels according to what we've collected. So let's open the file called demo. It's this one here. Joanna is the actual EEG file, and demo is the actual converted text file to PDF. So let's open that file. Every time BESA opens a file, it will read in all the trigger information, the header, etc., etc. There it is. That's my NIRS file. Obviously, I can go and change the gain. I'm going to go to 10 millivolts per division. So now I can see beautifully channel 1, oxyhemoglobin, deoxyhemoglobin, total hemoglobin. Channel 2, same here, oxy, deoxy, total. Channel 3 all the way to channel 20. And the channel status is my actual trigger. And as you can see, every second there is a trigger. Watch this. Here it says 10 seconds. We have 10 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 divisions. One division is 1 second. These trigger marks are around 1 division apart from each other. So there again, the 1 second triggers have been embedded into the NIRS file from the USB receiver, sent over to the trigger input of the light NIRS, embedded in the file. We have it all together. So we have the light NIRS file beautifully synchronized with the 1-second triggers. That's all I'm going to show you using the light NIRS file. Now you can do some stuff here with BESA, you can do an FFT if you wanted to do that. You know, all the traditional stuff BESA allows you to do, you can do. What you might want to do is, you remember that these are called oxy-HB, oxy-deoxy-total, oxy-deoxy-total. BESA doesn't recognize these labels. What you want to do is create an ELP file that would actually then put the holders on the head in the right positions using a Patriot or using a Fast Track from Polymus. But then again, it wouldn't be called PGR, which stands for polygraphy channels. It would then be called sculpt channels, because after we've done the actual locations on the head and implemented an ELP file, BESA would say, okay, that's all clear, it's sculpt files, and then these would show up on the head, and then you can do, of course, source analysis on all the beautiful things BESA offers using an NIRS file. It's absolutely spot on, it's fantastic stuff. That's it for the single light NIRS file. And so let's head over to actually bring these two files together, because that's the whole point of this exercise. Let's go back to the folder. As you can see, we used to have 3 files. We had a text file. That was the original light NIRS file. We have the BDF file. This was is the original EEG file. This is the actual converted file to BDF, but sneaked 2 more files. These files were created by BESA. So normally what we would do is create another folder called EEG or NIRS analysis, Joanna, whatever. And then, because BESA creates a lot of files, because it never touches the original file, as you can see. So this is the original BDF file, hasn't been altered, hasn't been changed in any way. BESA doesn't do that. So BESA creates additional files. Now let's just delete these because we don't need them. So we're back to our 2 files or 3 files, the text file, which is our NIRS file, and the BDF file, which is our EEG file. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is different. We're gonna go back to ActiTools. And this time, we're going to use not the converter, because we're not gonna convert any files. We're gonna merge the 2 files. And remember what I said before, when we merge the NIRS file with the EEG file, the ActiTool software will automatically look at the sample rate of the EEG. It knows the sample rate of the NIRS, and then up samples that to the sample rate of the actual EEG, also including a filter, so that the data doesn't look staircasey, but it looks really nice and round. And so that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to go to Merger. We don't have any information yet because we haven't chosen the files yet. So what we're going to do is hit the Start button. And the first thing it asks me, what is your light NIRS file, or where is it? And it's this one here, right? So I say OK. And then it's going to ask me, okay, where is your BDF file? And of course, it's not the converted BDF file, but it's the actual EEG file of Joanna. So we click on Go. And as you can see, progress is in action. We end up with a green LED saying we have completed successfully. What we have converted, or respectively merged, is we have merged 60 channels of NIRS. Typically we could have 64 channels of EEG. We have 27 in this case. So we have a total number of channels of 87. That's 60 plus 27. It tells me the original NIRS sample rate, which was 13.5 Hertz, which was now up sampled to our 2 kilohertz. We have 314 seconds of NIRS data, and we have recorded 186 seconds of EEG data. Why? And I'll tell you why. Because what we always do is we start the NIRS first, and then we start saving the EEG, but only then later. Why? Because what we do is we start NIRS and then we send one marker to event in the NIRS the start of the actual file. When we do a conversion, when we do a merging of these files, ActiRead will, or ActiTools in this particular case, when it merges, it will look in the file for the first green start epoch marker in the NIRS. And when it finds that, it will then start to zip with the zipper principle, push the two files together second by second until the end of the actual epoch, and then give us a totally synchronized file. Okay, so that's why the NIRS data is longer than the actual EEG data, because if I hit the save button on NIRS and the save button of EEG at the same time and stop at the same time, the length would be exactly the same. But that's not what we intend to do. So we start NIRS first, let it run, see what is the NIRS data like, and then we hit the record button, and then only then we hit the record button of the EEG to actually leave a start marker in the NIRS file. That's how it works. So let's have a look at the actual file. So we go to ActiRead again, because ActiRead just gives us a nice overview of what we've actually just merged. And when I go say new file, I can go and say, oh, here it is. It now says, and that's really beautifully labeled, I like that. It's called Joanna 1, which is the PDF file, the EEG file. And it says plus. Plus means and another file. And the other file is called demo 2022, whatever. And it actually puts these two files together. So I say, okay, and there it is. So immediately I look again. ActiRead only displays 16 channels. That's okay. So it shows us 16 channels of EEG, not actually a reference to any channel. So if I move forward, we had some artifacts there. So here is the EEG. We can apply a bandpass filter. So here goes the EEG. We can do a bit of a better sensitivity level. So here's the EEG going through of Joanna. We had some movement artifacts here, definitely. So don't worry about these. Here she was doing something else. So here's the EEG. That's all good. If I look at the number of channels, I have 1 channel to 86 channels. That's exactly what I said before. So obviously, and remember this, the oximetry channels are very, very big channels, millivolt channels, whereas the EEG are microvolt channels. The problem with ActiRead, and that's okay, we cannot apply a sensitivity suitable for both channels. So I'm going to about 50 millivolts. I can see the oximetry channel really nicely. I can move to the file. And of course, if I put my hand on the control button or on the shift button, I can quickly check on several channels. So I see channel 18, 19, 20. Now, of course, 18 means oxy, deoxy, and total hemoglobin. So 3 channels per channel. So that's our 60 channels, right? 3 times 20, 60 channels, right? And we also have 26 channels of EEG. That's why we have a total of 86 channels. So if I also want to see some EEG channels, I can click, let's say, 1 to 8, for example. So that I can hit the control button and I can select a couple of oximetry channels. Now I see EEG channels and oximetry channels. Obviously, I can't see much EEG. Now I can, but now the oximetry channel is very, very big. But that's okay. I'm not going to go beyond that because within BESA, that is all changeable. You can apply sensitivity levels just for the EEG, 5 microvolts, 10 microvolts, and for the oximetry, 5 millivolt, 50 millivolts, and then you can see both data sets on the same screen in a very, very nice display gained. What I'm going to show you here is much more important for you to understand. Let's move to the beginning of the file. So I'm at the beginning of the actual acquired file. Let's change just for niceness of display, let's change to a higher gain. So now I see the oximetry channels nicely, the EEG channels of course all flat with 50, 20 millivolts, it's clear. But now let's focus on the triggers. And that is the absolute important thing for you to understand. So let me go to monopolar zoom, because in monopolar zoom I can see some times, okay? So let's look at the bottom here, where the actual triggers appear. What we've done is when we actually ran the EEG and collected the EEG, we also collected a trigger. And I did this to show you that when you do a combined acquisition of NIRS and EEG, then remember with the light NIRS only has 3 trigger inputs. So if you wanted to use presentation and present 8 bits, 255 markers, you cannot do that on the light NIRS because you only have 3 inputs, okay? What you can do though is, when you remember the setup on the table, you saw that I had a split trigger cable. We had 8 bits that came in from presentation, like it did here. And we have 3 bits or 2 bits that go over to the light NIRS for the start event and for the second triggers. That's all I want to have in my light NIRS file, because when I present 8 additional bits from presentation, I can use a splitter cable, and because the 8 bits are in the EEG file, they would appear obviously also on the merged NIRS file as well. So beautiful. So we have here, we have the trigger marks 1 and 2, which is a marker 3. Obviously, trigger bit 1 and 2 is a marker 3. That was presented every, we can measure the time delay of those. So if I just pull that a bit together like this, I can say, okay, how long was the trigger interstimulus interval? It was 400 milliseconds, okay? But that has nothing to do with the outcome of this file, because remember, Joanna was doing a Jenga, and so we didn't actually use any triggers. I just embedded those to show you that we can collect 8 bits, 255 markers, in a EEG and the light NIRS file merged together. So the triggers are there. You can do any paradigm that you can think of, because we have 8 bits. Remember, the Active 2 has 16 trigger inputs. We have a low byte section and we have a high byte section. In the low byte section, we collect the triggers from presentation E' et al. On the high byte side, we collect triggers that come in from 9 to 16. Remember, on the USB receiver, we have 1 to 16 holes or ports for the 16 bits. So 8-bit low byte, 8-bit high byte. On the high byte side, we send 1 trigger into the Active 2 on the EEG, and we send a start trigger into the NIRS that uses the first trigger port of the light NIRS. We also send, as soon as we start collecting, we're sending every second a trigger to the EEG and to the light NIRS. And this is what you can see. Something that is probably unclear when you actually look at the bottom here. You can see don't worry about the blue one, but see just the green one, the purple one, and the gray one. The light NIRS triggers on an upgoing 5-volt trigger on an edge. As soon as it actually triggered that edge, it samples that trigger at 13 Hertz. As for the Active 2 triggers actually from positive to negative, so from high to low. That's why when we send a trigger to the active 2, it should actually just give one purple marker as we start recording, but it doesn't. It gives a continuous line because it goes to high, but then because it stays on the 5 volt level, it's just a purple line all the way through. So the green one is the green and the blue are the 2 triggers sent to the light NIRS. The green one just marks start of the file. That's all it does. So as soon as we hit record, the active 2 USB receiver sends a trigger over to the NIRS, and it's green. And so it's trigger input probably 14 or something. So it sends it in there, marks the light NIRS file saying this is the start of the file. That's all that trigger does. It won't appear all the way to the end of the recording. At the end, it'll just mark stop recording, and then we know within the 2 green markers, this is our light NIRS file, start, end. With the EEG, we then just start to introduce those gray trigger around the 1 second timers. Okay, now let's actually open this up a little bit so we can actually see. So when I go to the blue marker here and I measure its latency, I can see immediately it's around 77 milliseconds long of trigger. That's the sample rate of the NIRS. 1 divided by 77 is around 13 Hertz. So there is your actual 1 second marker being as long as the sample rate on the NIRS is. Now, because we're not in a perfect world, we have to remember that the sample rate may vary. And so to make sure that we're not losing or we're not synchronizing every single second marker, Biosemi Kuhn has decided to actually embed the 1 second marker of his EEG system, of the Active 2, which is in this particular case 253 milliseconds long. He has actually implemented that somewhere in the middle of the actual time marker for the light NIRS. So if it's a little bit less sample rate, it's okay because we're in the middle, so we can shift a little bit to the right or to the left. If it's longer than 13 Hertz, 14, 15 Hertz, we're in the middle, nothing can happen. We actually always sync on those second markers. That's it. There's not much more I can say about this. So it's clear that when we actually run through the whole acquisition, we can see nothing changes in terms of those triggers at the bottom. That's it. We have a merged NIRS EEG file. We can display it in BESA. It's better than, of course, in ActiRead. ActiRead doesn't give as much functions anyway, but that's okay. May change in the future. But what's important here is we can check the trigger length, we can check the trigger positions, and as we can see, we've done the right thing. We've collected EEG, we've collected NIRS, we brought them together. We didn't have to push a response button every 2 seconds or something. It's all automatically done. The USB receivers, which actually come in the latest version, that actually allows to always send triggers out of the ports 15 and 16. I think it is in the USB receiver coming from 29 and 30 inside the USB receiver. You don't have to worry about any of these things. It's automatically done. The only thing you need is an appropriate trigger cable if you want to synchronize an ear system. That's it. Let's again open BESA. And in BESA, we're going to open this merged file now, just to show you what it could look like when you do an analysis. So let me go to File, let me go to Open, and the plus is the merged file. So we hit on, of course, on this one here, plus, and we say open. So it's going to open that file. And here is your results. Very, very interesting. So we have the sculpt channels, OZ to IZ. In fact, we've also recorded respiratory. This is really nice. Let's just change quickly the power of the display gain for the NIRS. Let's move that to around 15 millivolts. That's okay. And let's just open up the actual EEG, so that there is your artifacts, etc., etc. Now remember, there is no montage applied to the EEG, and remember that with the Active 2, the reference is always CMS unless you change the montage. And also that you remember that CMS is not a really good reference. You have to take the common mode, which is 50 Hertz from the DRL, out of the EEG, and so give you the average, a different montage altogether. Now, of course, there is no filters applied, so let's choose 40 Hertz to, and also apply a notch filter, because we're filming, we're adding all these power supplies, etc. So there is our EEG, which is quite nice artifact, of course, because we're doing the testing, etc. So there is our EEG. It's very, very nice with an applied montage. But if we remove the montage, we go to original recording, we can now see the EEG and we can see the oximetry. I'm using a very small screen, so I can't really see much, I have to admit, but let's just actually see the polygraphy channels. The polygraphy channels again is of course one respiratory channels, because we also actually record the respiration from the thorax. And of course we have all our 20 channels of NIRS. And as you can see, BESA labels them really nicely into oxyhemoglobin, deoxyhemoglobin, and total hemoglobin. This is channel 1, this is channel 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. We can change the gain. We can go to 10 millivolts, 1 millivolt, 5 millivolts is probably not bad. And then of course we can start looking for an event when she was concentrating on the Jenga. And of course, in the end, when it actually crashed, there may be some big oximetry. We can change also the time base, because remember, near start is very slow. So using 8 seconds or 10 seconds is not very interesting. So let's go to 60 seconds, which is done now. Let's change the gain a little bit. And of course, we can see some that's our respiration channel spitting in. Not to worry, but here we can actually see the NIRS data on the bottom. Now, having said that, we're not gonna do anything to the file. We can run a quick average to show you what that looks like if we presented the trigger. It's a really nice display, by the way. But what we should really do is get a fast track, get the MRI data, which we also recorded of Joanna, and get all the locations of the holders for the NIRS, all the holders of the EEG, because remember, the EEG holders are not in a real 10-20 position on our NIRS cap, the combined cap, because it's not possible because of all these holders. We have 80 NIRS holders and 75 EEG holders, I believe we have, on the same cap, which is really not easy to have 10-20 in any sense. But if we had a fast track, we can of course get all these locations, and then we have all scalp channels on the head, even for the NIRS holders. But let's just do one more thing. I'm going to actually open the just NIRS file, just to show you that we can also do that with BESA, which is really nice. So here is just the NIRS, not merged, and we can just quickly do an average, and that then concludes my demonstration on what we've done. So let's go to trigger 2, because trigger 2 is the actual event triggers that we've implemented, and just call it trigger 1. Define, add to list, set, go to condition, say just call it oxy, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's up to you in the thing. Insert. We've collected 263 1-second markers for the whole run, and we go to average and just average the whole thing. And let's see what this could look like if you implemented an actual trigger and was actually anticipating getting oximetry data for this trigger. And so we say save, and this is what it looks like. And that's pretty nice, because now it tells me we have done an oximetry average. We have channel 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. Remember again, it's oxy, hemoglobin, deoxy, and total oxy hemoglobin. All nicely presented on a screen, which we can do some analysis. We can even do a overplot, which doesn't give us much information, because remember, this was Jenga. We didn't send any triggers to actually trigger an event or anything. It was just Jenga, spontaneous. If we did an SCP, for example, that could be interesting. So we can stimulate the left leg and get a right hemisphere response after 20, 30 milliseconds. We can see an oximetric change, and we can also see, of course, an SCP. Which could be averaged in this particular point in time. So that's it from me here. Thank you very much. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like if you liked it, and that's it from me now.